Hi, everyone. Welcome to the AWS Cloud, What's New and What's Hot Summit. This event was organized by the hardworking folks at AWS Insider and Virtualization Cloud Review, who have brought together some of the best independent experts on today's topic. Many thanks to our sponsor, Quality Systems. Quality orchestrates and deploys cloud infrastructure so you can understand usage, boost developer productivity, and optimize cloud costs. Without them, this event would not be possible. And thanks to you for joining us. I'm John K. Waters, Editor-in-Chief of the Converge 360 Group of 1105 Media, and I'll be your moderator for the first of two information-packed sessions. But before we get started, just a bit of housekeeping. Each of today's sessions is being recorded for later access. Keep an eye out for an email with a link to that recording. It'll be coming your way in the next few days. This session will be followed by a 10-minute Q&A. You can type your questions into the Q&A box at any time. We'll do our best to get to all of them. Our sponsor has provided some extra resources you won't want to miss. They're available now on your console. At the end of the summit, you'll be asked to take a short survey. We know you guys are busy, but we're hoping you'll take just a moment to give us your honest feedback about today's event. And last but not least, at the end of the next session, one lucky attendee will be receiving a pair of high-end Bose noise-canceling headphones. But you must be present to win, so stick with us. Now let's get started with our first session, What's New and Hot in AWS in 50 minutes. For this session, we've called on Stephen Smiley. Certified cloud security professional and AWS ambassador Stephen Smiley is a consulting director at ScaleSec, where he leads the firm's cloud security advisory and engineering efforts. A former military intelligence officer, he employs both strategic and tactical thinking to help his company's customers accomplish their objectives. Through his work, he focuses on architecting secure and reliable systems that allow his company's customers to move swiftly without compromising security. I know you guys are in for an awesome session. Take it away, Stephen.
Hey, thank you so much, John. I'm really happy to be here today. It's always fun to talk about what's new and hot, right? I am Stephen Smiley. I work at ScaleSec. We're a small consultancy, and this is what I do all day, right, is help customers figure out how to use their cloud environment securely, get more business value out of them, maybe also save costs or meet compliance goals. But I really love this, and so I would love to invite our attendees today to drop some questions in the Q&A box. I really want to be here for you. If you've got challenges, let me know. Tell me what you're working on, and let's talk about it, right? And if you want to connect afterwards and continue the conversation, I'm really happy to do that as well. I will be at the AWS conference next month if you want to come out and meet me in person. If you happen to come be in Las Vegas, and I would love to meet you. So today, we're talking about a number of things. AWS continues to launch new things, make new announcements, and I'm sure we're going to see some new ones really soon as we get ready for the big conference, AWS reInvent. But there's plenty of things to talk about today. Here are some of the ones we've got. We're talking about, all the AI stuff that they've got going on, but also, better ways to access AWS environment, better ways to manage your access requests, do zero trust without a VPN, and lots of stuff with data changes and governance. We got lots of stuff to talk about, and I think that while maybe not everything will apply to somebody, I'm sure something in here will pique your interest. So please let me know, and let's dig into it. So one of the big things that everybody wants to talk about right now is AI, right? Generative AI. And of course, AWS is going to be there, right? AWS has been doing AI within their own products for, 20 plus years. And now they're really making it available to other people easy ways. So there's two major services AWS is offering around AI, Bedrock and SageMaker. And I want to try to explain the difference between them and the different roles that they play. So we're going to look at Bedrock here first. Bedrock is offering foundation models, and these same models will be available in SageMaker as well, or they are there. But these models, some of them are from Amazon, right? So Amazon offers its own model, like Amazon Titan. But also, they have invested heavily in Anthropic, and they're hosting models from Cohere, AI21, Stability AI. So, and actually, more recently, they're also hosting the Llama 2 model from Meta. And so you'll be able to leverage these foundation models privately, right? So whereas if you go to ChatGPT or you go to some other website, you're not getting a private instance of that, right? Like you can play around with them out there, but whatever you put into that, I would not consider secure or private. That's not a production quality use case for your business, right? But Amazon is making that available. So some of these use cases that you're going to use it for are things like if you want to make your own chat bot that can actually communicate with your users. Now that might be an external user, right? But it also could be an internal user. And we're actually going to talk about how you can get those chatbots to do things internal to your organization here in just a minute. But they also can be used for text generation, image generation. So basically all the AI use cases that people are doing right now, Bedrock is going to support. In addition to these foundation models, you have the ability to fine-tune one of those models with your own data. So, in a lot of use cases, the foundation model might be enough, right? You can ask it to summarize this article. Well, I don't need to fine-tune my model if I just want it to summarize some text, right? However, there's going to be a lot of use cases where businesses are going to want to fine-tune these models with some of their own labeled data. And they can do that here with Bedrock. And then you can host your own private endpoint of the model. So you provided it a bunch of data, but it didn't go to some unknown place, right? What AWS is doing is they're setting up essentially an escrow model where you get a private endpoint. You don't get access to the underlying infrastructure, and you don't really need that, right? But also the model provider. So let's say you're using Anthropic's model, for example. Anthropic will have no access to what you are putting in. So they can't use your data to further train their model. So you are not leaking your data to anybody else. And that's going to be pretty important for anybody doing a production use case of AI. So you can fine-tune the model, you can get a private instance, and then when you want to use it, you have to do zero management of that underlying infrastructure. I've got a diagram on the screen right here showing how simple it is that your application can simply call invoke model against the Bedrock API and receive a response. That's how easy this is. Now, in many cases, you may actually want a streaming response. So if you're accustomed to using these AI things, you'll see that you don't wait and then get one big chunk, but most of the time you get a streaming response, and Bedrock supports that as well. So it's as simple as asking for that model invocation and then processing the response within your application. So this is going to be the easiest way to leverage generative AI in your applications. And when you're experimenting with it, Bedrock provides you this playground, as you can see on the screen here, where you can try out the different models and see how well they work for your use case. This is a shared environment, so this is not one that you're going to want to put sensitive data into. But this is where you can try out the different models against each other and then see, okay, this, Anthropic's performing the best for this, or whatever model is performing appropriately, and then you can go and provision your own private instance. So if you haven't checked this out, it's definitely worth doing. This is ready for production, and it's really only going to continue to get better. So that is new, and that is definitely hot. Let's talk a little bit about where this is going. So AI task automation with Bedrock agents, this is currently in preview, but this is a glimpse into the future of what we're going to be using AI for. So the agent is essentially, a coworker that you could have, right? And you get a little chat interface, and you can talk to this agent like you're talking to any other coworker. You can ask them for information. You can ask them to perform a task. But you can actually enable these agents to do things within your organization. So in order to get them to do things, you have to configure those actions, right? And they're going to run in AWS Lambda functions. So you do have to, write the function that makes the API call, which is good, right? Because that means it's fully customizable to whatever you need. And it's not like the agent is, making up what it's allowed to do, right? You get to severely restrict what it's able to do. And you can even actually configure the agent to ask for more information, right? So it knows a little bit about what it's able to do. If you give it a command and it doesn't have enough information, it can come back and say, oh, I need this, which is pretty useful. We are not accustomed to that capability in most systems. And then I have a screenshot here of what it would look like to provide this agent the API specification. So in this case, we're providing an API specification that says, hey, you can go get a list of open insurance claims, for example. And in order to do that, here's the API schema that you will need to submit to this endpoint. And then by providing the agent this schema, when the chatbot receives a request, it's like, hey, go find all open claims. It knows that it can do this. So this is in preview. I would expect a lot of improvement over the next 12 months here. And I would say that if you can think of use cases here, you can improve efficiency a lot. Now, I understand that some people are going to have security concerns with this. I don't need robots querying my data. I don't need robots, taking actions. But really, that's going to all come down to how you write the functions to make sure that those things are safe and, auditable and understandable. So I'm very excited about this. I think you should be too. And that is definitely hot right now. So let's talk about a little bit more customizable use of AI in AWS. So Bedrock is definitely the easiest way to use AI, or more on the data science side, and you want to do more advanced customization of your models. SageMaker is going to be where you want to go. And SageMaker provides you these private compute instances that are prepared and they are optimized for machine learning use cases, right? So it's essentially you get a Jupyter notebook that data scientists are accustomed to using, and you can choose the compute instance type, right? So you can get a very powerful instance or a smaller one if you're just experimenting. And then you get to put in here any series of commands to load your data, test stuff, compare, performance. And so this is where you can do a lot of advanced experimentation with AI, and then ultimately publish a model from here if you want. So this is something that is not going to be as easy to use, but is going to be suitable for advanced use cases. And with the SageMaker Jumpstart options, you're getting very easy starting points with all the same models that are available. So whether that's text or code or classification, summarization, even speech recognition. So this is where you're going to do all those advanced use cases. And the major difference in pricing here is that because you're getting a private compute instance, you're going to pay per hour by the instance size that you're using here, as opposed to paying kind of per invocation of the Bedrock agent. I'm sorry, of the Bedrock API. So those are the two major ways that you'll be using AI in AWS. And if you've got some interesting use cases, I'd love to hear about them. Let's talk about how we can make that happen. Okay, so moving on to another hot topic. Recently, AWS published a tool for managing access requests and approvals. The tool is called Identity Center Team, or TEAM. TEAM standing for Temporary Elevated Access Management. This is something that I have long thought is overlooked in the security world. We talk a lot about least privilege, but we don't think about, when is this granted and who granted? A lot of times there's a central admin who's granting access, whether or not that access is appropriate. Invoke it. So having this workflow, I think, really can help streamline your processes and reduce risk. So although I would like this to be built in as a first-class feature in AWS, they're not there yet. But you can host this yourself, and it should be pretty easy to run. And then you get all the capability. So it gives you a familiar interface. We've got the screenshots on the screen here, where what you're going to do is essentially you're going to set up two types of policies. One policy is going to be for the eligibility. So who is eligible for what level of access, right? So they can go to which accounts with which permission sets, right? And then the other side of the policy is going to be the approvers. So who is allowed to approve which accounts, and then kind of essentially what are the requirements for this to happen. Once this is set up, and you'll want to maintain that over time, people will be able to log in, create a request, and say, hey, I would like access to, for example, I would like to go to the log archive account because I'm a security auditor and I need to see that these logs are being shipped correctly. I only need this access for 1 hour, and I would like it to start tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., something like that. And I can put in a justification for why I need that. And when I submit that request, you're going to get a notification. You can configure notifications either via email, or there's a custom Slack app that's available. So you get this notification, and that's going to go to the approvers, who can then say, yes, I approve this access. And then when that access is ready, the user will get a notification that says, hey, your session is now available. You may begin. And then after that time period, this access will be automatically revoked. So that provides a much smoother process. The approval will be done by somebody who knows what's going on in that environment, and you get logs of all of this. So if there's any inappropriate access, granting, anything like that, you'll be able to see it. And Team also provides the ability to see all the actions taken during a single session, right? So if an auditor says, well, I need to see what this user did during the session, they can go and see it, not just by, time period, but by that specific session. So that is really powerful for compliance purposes. And if you run a central security team, this helps take a lot of the effort off of your shoulders, where you can set this up, you can facilitate its use, but you don't need to be the one managing the specific access, and yet you can still audit what's going on with it. So I think that this is a great idea. There have been a few commercial products launched recently in this space, but having a free open source one is really valuable. And I expect that probably within a few years, this is going to become something that everybody is using, one solution or another. Okay. Moving on. Another very hot topic, this has been hot for years now, is zero trust, right? And AWS is now providing a robust solution for doing this. So what is zero trust? The term may be a little bit confusing, but it's ultimately saying, I'm not going to implicitly trust anybody just because they are on some network. Instead, I am only going to provide a network connection between this person and their endpoint when they have been approved for some policy, right? And like they have authenticated and they are authorized to reach this endpoint. And I am going to check all the way down to their user and potentially down to their device to make sure that they're connecting from a secure device. And so AWS Verified Access provides this solution. So most of us have used VPNs for this kind of capability for a long time. Verified Access is ready to replace your VPN for your internal applications. There's a limited number of trust providers right now, however. So for user identities, I think the vast majority of people are going to want to use IAM Identity Center because that's probably what you're already using for your AWS access. But you can use any OIDC compliant provider. On the device side, however, there's only two supported trust providers right now, and that's CrowdStrike and Jamf. And I know that those are very popular, so most places are using those, or many places are. But I would like to see that list grow over time. The way that this works is that you're going to create an application endpoint by the application, and you can set a policy on that application. And you can group applications if they happen to have the same policy, right? Because you're going to have that for many situations. Hey, this group of people can all connect to this set of applications. And then those policies are going to permit access based on conditions. So I have an example on the screen here where you can see that this is going to permit when the group contains example group. So if you're in this user group, but I also want to check that your email address is verified. I want to check that your device is connecting from the US. I want to see that your Jamf configuration is running and that Jamf has assessed your risk as low. I want to see that CrowdStrike is running and that CrowdStrike has assessed your risk as great, as some threshold. And so by doing this, even if this is a legitimate user, but their device has been compromised, I am not going to let them access my internal application, which is very powerful. And most places just aren't doing this yet because it has not been available. So AWS Verified Access makes this available. and it's very easy to use. So if you would like help setting that up, that's something I would love to talk more with you about. The other thing you're going to get is just rich audit logs, right, of who connected in at what time and to what endpoint and all of this, which is so much better than looking at VPN logs and then trying to correlate them with network flow logs. It's so hard to really determine what happened in the event of an incident. This will give you rich audit logs where you'll be able to see exactly who connected where and what was going on. Okay, so another thing that has been getting a lot of love recently is Amazon QuickSight. QuickSight is something that I have not been super eager to use in the past. It's been a bit clunky, and I don't know. I guess I have not had super robust use cases where QuickSight was the best answer. But Amazon's quickly changing that. So they just did a huge new interface and integration of AI features. Those are some of the big headline features, but in general, they're improving QuickSight significantly. So I've got some screenshots here of the new interface, and you'll see, first off, if you were familiar with the old one, this new interface is so much easier to use. It's so much more intuitive. And as a business intelligence customer, where I'm not a tech expert, I'm a BI developer, this is going to be much more friendly for me to use to make my visuals. But then also, QuickSight's adding ability with AI integration. So for example, you can ask it a question about your data. You can say, hey, which region sold the most orders, or something like that. Whatever your business intelligence question is, who had the most sales last quarter? And QuickSight Q will interpret that natural language question and create a query. And it can even create a visual. So on the left of the screen here, we can see you're asking forecast sales of a particular value by month, right? And it's developing a graph just based on that natural language. Now, I know that building graphs is not something that is necessarily that difficult, and the BI developers are comfortable doing that. But this is one of the areas of AI where I think people are just going to use it because it's just a lot easier, right? It's just going to save you, a minute here, 2 minutes there, and those things will add up, especially if you're exploring data, which is one of the main use cases of QuickSight. So QuickSight's definitely something to continue to look at if you have business intelligence needs. Okay, another announcement that is it's a pretty big change to AWS is that they are going to charge for all IP version 4 addresses. Now, it is very, very rare that AWS introduces a new charge. I don't know that I've ever seen them introduce a new charge like this. And it's extremely rare that they raise prices in any way. I mean, almost always they're reducing the price. But this is a case where there's just a good reason to do this. IP version 4 addresses are notoriously limited. IP version 6 has been around for a long time, and adoption has not been great for a variety of reasons. And so AWS is trying to create the incentive for us to preserve IP version 4 addresses. And so disincentivizing excess usage is definitely a good thing to do. So effective February 1st, I mean, they're giving us 6 months of notice here. Effective February 1st, there's going to be a small charge for each IP address per hour. This is not going to be very much if you don't use very many IP addresses, but it will add up if you have a number of public addresses. And so they've also released a tool to help you find all of those and figure out, where you can save. One of our attendees here is pointing out that IP addresses are running out, and that is correct, especially in IoT use cases, manufacturing, industrial, where every device wants to have a public address. IP version 6 supports that great, but unfortunately, we're not doing a great job as an industry of making that adoption happen. And so version 4 addresses are scarce, and so use this tool. Go find where your public IPs are, see what your costs are going to be. They will give you the ability to forecast those costs so that you know coming February 1st what to expect to change here. So I don't like paying extra money, but I do think this is a good thing for the industry. Okay. Another recent announcement is Amazon Data Zone. And this is an interesting service that, maybe not everybody is going to require, but those organizations who do have a lot of data access are, I think, going to benefit a lot from the capability that Data Zone brings. So, for a long time, security experts have recommended that we separate our data access and data management, right? We say, some tools are producing this data and the developers shouldn't have access to that data. They don't need it, right? And we don't want anybody having direct access to data. But then the people who do need access to data, they tend to not be the technical people who understand specific permissions and so forth. So we have always had a challenge of maintaining that separation and making sure that we control our data. And many organizations have invested heavily into building internal tools to try to solve that problem. And Amazon's giving us one here. So Data Zone is going to give you a separate portal application where you'll be able to populate a data catalog across all of your AWS accounts. So you're definitely going to have data across regions, across accounts, in Redshift, in S3, in different places. And so the AWS Glue capability will bring all of this together into a catalog, and then Data Zone will give you the ability to group people and assets into specific projects, and you'll be able to then enable requesting and approving access to that data. So once you have access, you'll be able to go and do a query in Amazon Athena or Redshift or wherever that is appropriate, but you will have then approved access in some standard workflow. And this can make it a lot easier for people to get access to the right data without a whole lot of overhead, right? Because otherwise, you wouldn't even necessarily know what's out there, right? You're manually creating a catalog, maybe that's in a spreadsheet somewhere, and then it gets out of date, and we all know how the story goes here. So Data Zone is going to help you automate this process, maintain an updated catalog, get access to the right people, and this is going to apply to, so many industries that have internally built, tools that just don't work very well, and they've got tons of data. So things, So we've got an attendee here pointing out healthcare, insurance, banking, right? So many industries have large amounts of data and have so much trouble getting it to the right people securely. Data Zone is a great solution there. If you have a use case here, I would love to talk with you and figure out whether or not this is the right solution for you. So let me know. Okay, another one, and this is one as a as a tech nerd at heart, I am very excited about. So Code Catalyst is providing a unified software development service that that AWS just has not had. So AWS for a long time has had a source code management tool in Code Commit. They've had a code pipeline, so you can run CI/CD pipelines. You can do code builds and code deploys. The problem is they just don't all work together, and the developers are not going to be comfortable using those. And then there's key features missing, and notably, they did not have any ability to do issues and have workflow boards. So Code Catalyst is putting this all together and filling those gaps. So finally, we have something here that can compete directly with GitHub in AWS. So Code Catalyst gives you the ability to create an issue just like you would in GitHub or GitLab or any other issue management software. Add it to a particular board to manage, this is something to do. We can move it to in progress or keep track of its status, assign it to particular people, manage its priority, tag it. So all the things that we're accustomed to doing in our development workflow. And then create pull requests and automate our CI/CD processes right here. Now, very interesting is that this is a general purpose solution. So you can use this to deploy to anywhere, not just AWS, right? So you can use any GitHub actions that are actually being brought in by AWS so that they're managed and available in Code Catalyst, but it supports GitHub Actions, which already has a rich ecosystem of automation. And it's going to support actions like secret scanning, security scanning, and then deployment to a number of different places. So if you're deploying to the AWS Kubernetes service or EKS, that is supported, and there's going to be there's available actions for that. But let's say you're deploying to Azure's Kubernetes service, right, over in the Microsoft Azure cloud, that is also supported from here, right? So whereas previously nobody would have recommended that you use, code pipeline to manage deployments to another cloud, this is now a viable option. You can use actions to deploy with Terraform or CloudFormation or CDK, and so you'll be able to build workflows much easier than you were able to before. And even better is that AWS is including blueprints for common applications. So for example, you're doing a .NET web service or something like that, it is going to have a basic blueprint for that will help you, bootstrap your build and deployment processes. So I'm very excited about this because at a minimum, me and my team need some way to manage issues and manage our work together. And so now we can spin this up right here in AWS. If you don't need all of that and you just got your code and you want to run it in AWS, but you still want automated build and deployment, App Runner has quickly become the easiest way to run your app on AWS. So this is something where if you don't want to become an AWS expert, you don't want to write a bunch of CloudFormation, you just want this done, and you want a secure URL with a proper public certificate, and you want auto scaling, right? And all the benefits of AWS, but you don't want to build all of that yourself. App Runner lets you point to your source code. Say, hey, my code's over here in GitHub. I'm going to configure my build. I need this much vCPU and memory, right? Set up some auto scaling and health checks so that I can, properly fail over and so forth. And that's all I need to do, right? It's just a few simple steps. And then App Runner will manage the rest of that for you. So if you've got something that you need to deploy, but you don't want to become an AWS expert, App Runner is the way to go. In a lot of cases, Elastic Beanstalk was what App Runner, was going for that before. But the App Runner team went and talked to these other teams, saying, what are the most common use cases? Like, how do we make this as streamlined as possible? And so this is the spiritual successor to Beanstalk. And I think a lot of people are seeing incredible value out of this so that they can just run their app and not worry about it too much. Okay, here's one that's a little bit more advanced, but I think that particular use cases are going to find this very valuable. So Postgres on RDS now supports active replication. So what does that mean? Well, in multi-region architectures, if I want my Postgres database to be in both of those regions, and I want the applications in both of those regions to be able to write to the same database in that region, now this is supported. So there is a extension for Postgres called PG Active, like Postgres Active, and it is now available in RDS. Now, I will caution you that this is very rarely needed. If you can avoid this, you should avoid this, right? Like, you don't need multi-region for most use cases. There will also need to be some changes to your application to be able to handle this architecture. So for example, if I have two things writing to two distinct databases and they do that at the same time, I may introduce a conflict. Your application is going to need to be prepared to handle that conflict, for example. There also will be some lag between in replicating the data between these two things. And so your application needs to be able to handle, well, what if that data is not there yet, right? Your application may also have an incremental sequence, right? So it's providing integers, and both cannot do that at the same time, or you'll end up with, conflicting identifiers, right? So there will need to be some application changes to take advantage of this. If you are looking to do a global database, I would still push you to use something like DynamoDB's global tables. Now, that is a NoSQL scheme, so it is different than the fully relational Postgres, but it is better suited for handling a multi-region architecture. But this is now available, and so the people who do need this, I'm sure, will be very excited to be able to use this. This is something that has been a differentiator for Google Cloud for a while, because Google Cloud's Cloud Spanner service does provide a active, like global consistency for their database. And so that's something that AWS has not been able to do until now. So now there's an option in AWS. Okay. The next one here is OpenSearch improvements. And if you followed this story, there was a change to the license of Elasticsearch, where it basically no longer became open source. And they had some pretty good business reasons for doing that. But as a result, Amazon forked the Elasticsearch project to create OpenSearch. And since then, they have been making a number of improvements to it that I think are welcome improvements. So OpenSearch is best suited for time series data. It's also good at doing full text search. for unstructured situations. This is really not a quick site competitor, right? This is not trying to do business intelligence. So this is time series data, application monitoring, things like that, and so they have been making a number of improvements to OpenSearch. I see one question here today is OpenSearch a viable alternative to Elasticsearch? And the answer is yes, right? I mean, so OpenSearch and Elasticsearch were essentially the same thing. They've just now, forked off, and OpenSearch improvements have been made by Amazon. So in particular, they now offer an OpenSearch serverless option, and what that will do is that will give you the ability to do less management of OpenSearch. So Elasticsearch kind of famously is very difficult to manage with all the scaling and updates and sharding and instance sizing and so forth. OpenSearch serverless relieves you of those abilities. It decouples your compute and storage capabilities. The storage is backed by S3, and so it decouples those, and it decouples the ingest side from the query side of this. So on the ingest side, OpenSearch is taking in the data, managing indexes for searching, and then on the query side, it actually is running those searches. So OpenSearch serverless decouples the resources used for those things, so that if you have a large amount of ingest and few searches, it's adapting to those. Or if you vice versa, right? So if you have only a little bit of data coming in, but you're doing a high volume of searches, it manages separately. And you just don't have to think about it. Whereas in the Elasticsearch world before, this is something where you would have had to deal with it, and it was a big pain. So the big note to have here is that OpenSearch serverless, it doesn't scale to zero. It doesn't go down. If you have a small environment, it's still going to be expensive, unfortunately. So if you have a small OpenSearch requirement, I wouldn't go serverless on it. I would just provision the right size instance. One of the other things that they're doing with this is they are building out the security analytics capability. They're allowing it to bring in a format for security data, the OCSF, which seems to be what they are pushing towards. So there's a competing format, the Elastic Common Schema, which other tools have used, but Amazon seems to be going heavy on this open format. That is what's used in their security lake capability. And so OpenSearch, while yes, you can store some of your data in OpenSearch, it can also draw information from, or draw its data from a service like Security Lake. So you don't necessarily have to store all of your data in OpenSearch if you don't want to have the performance impact there. So the latest improvements bring improved alerting, improved anomaly detection. You can set up composite monitors, geospatial aggregations, and when you're using the security analytics, you can set up custom rules for detections. You can correlate data across multiple sources to enable those detections and alerts. So if you want, you can build a fully functional SIEM, a security information and event management tool in OpenSearch. And people have done this for a long time using Elasticsearch with Logstash and Kibana. So that's not a new concept, but AWS is making that a lot easier to do with OpenSearch with security analytics. And backed by Security Lake, this is becoming a flexible and powerful combination for building your own SIEM. Okay, So I know I covered a lot of different topics today. I would love to answer any questions that you have. Put them in the Q&A box and let's get into it.
Okay, Stephen, let's see what we've got here. Let's start with this one here. How do I avoid accidentally running up a huge AWS bill?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? That's one of the first questions that people get into AWS. How do I avoid a huge bill? The simple answer is to set budgets in your AWS environment, right, at a reasonable level, and get those alerts, and just keep an eye on it and keep updating them as things evolve, right? So with a small environment, that's not going to be too much trouble. You can set a $500 alert or whatever is appropriate for your environment, and it'll let you know not just if you've reached it, but also if you're on track to reach it. So that's an important first step in getting their environment. Unfortunately, I often see people don't even do this, and they've been running their environment for years. So whether you're new or experienced, definitely set up some good budget. At a bigger organization level, you can definitely do this. What you want to do is you want to set up categories, cost categories. So that's like by account or by service, to group the right things so that you can attribute costs to the right people, right departments, and keep an eye on it that way. When I work with my clients, I advise them to set up kind of an ongoing cadence to review those so that it just doesn't get forgotten, and come back and say, are we spending too much here? How much do we think we're going to be spending? Where can we cut costs? In the cloud, architecture and costs are so tightly linked that you're going to have to get your technical people involved to find good cost savings. But the first step is just keeping an eye on it and having good budgets and forecasts.
Okay, Rakesh is wondering, is OpenSearch a very viable alternative to Elasticsearch?
But my answer is yes, right? They are so similar under the hood that the answer is yes. And Elasticsearch does offer a cloud-hosted version, and so you can use that if you'd like. And the OpenSearch hosted one also works well. So they're pretty direct competitors.
Okay, so Victor is actually wondering how verified access works in a hybrid cloud, hybrid environment.
That is a good question. I would have to get back to you on specifically how you would use that for something in a hybrid environment. So you're thinking about creating an endpoint or providing access to something on-prem. I have not done that. So when I've done this, you would create the endpoint and it would go to your AWS VPC. So I'm not sure if you can do that to an on-prem thing. I don't think you can.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
But if you were authenticating access to AWS environment, AWS hosted tools, then it would just be checking the posture of your user identity and device. Yeah.
Okay. James is wondering, how do you balance the security of Zero Trust with ease of use for developers? We've implemented Zero Trust in our Azure workflows and have gotten a lot of complaints from developers about having to make redundant calls when using multiple services. Is the answer just that the security is worth the trade-off?
That's an interesting question. I would be interested to dig into where you're running into those issues. There may be ways to streamline that, especially if you're talking about Azure workflows where potentially automation could help relieve that effort. But in general, yeah, I mean, I do think the security is worth the trade-off here. Yeah.
Okay, Lynn, one of our frequent flyers, hi Lynn, is wondering, can you highlight some of the most significant product releases or updates from AWS in recent months that have generated excitement in the industry?
Yeah, I mean, so the big ones here, Lynn, are really around the AI stuff, right? Like those are the most significant ones, is Bedrock and the updates to SageMaker. But so I think Bedrock is the one that's going to get the most attention and generated the most excitement, particularly because it's just so easy to use. And I'm skipping ahead here, but like I see another question here about, is generative AI only for data scientists? And Bedrock is making it accessible to regular solutions architects, right? You don't need to be a data scientist to use it. You don't need to do the math behind a neural net, right? Like you're not doing that difficult math. As long as you understand what you're getting back and that it's, that it is a language model or, it is an AI model, that it is not a, deterministic answer. As long as you understand that, it is ready for you to build into your applications where you see fit, right? You could imagine plenty of opportunities where summarization of text could be valuable, right? Your application takes in a bunch of text and you want to create a short summary. That's just an API call away with Bedrock, for example, right? You can imagine it generating text, taking a list of bullets and generating prose where you find that to be valuable, right? So we could list a number of things like that. But generative AI is going to be democratized, and it's not going to be limited to data scientists.
Okay. This attendee, and I'm going to try, Thiru Venkadan, my apologies for the mispronunciation, is wondering, can Cognito be integrated with GCP and Azure for seamless authentication as well as authorizations?
So yes. So Cognito is going to focus on the authentication specifically to application users. So if your application is hosted in GCP or Azure, Cognito can definitely support authentication of those users to that application. I would not use it to authenticate to like the GCP environment itself or the Azure environment. It's not really suitable for that. Although you might be able to hack it to make it work. I wouldn't recommend it. But if you're using it for application user access, yes, it doesn't matter where that is.
Okay, it looks like we've got time for one more question. This one from Zeke, who's wondering, who says, we're looking to start a new migration to AWS. How do you recommend we get started?
Yeah, I get this question a lot because a lot of people want to get started with migration. They're not exactly sure where to start. My advice here is to pick a few key workloads that will benefit from the cloud, and get aligned with some partner who can help you do that and do it in a clean first wave, and let that prove the value to you, right? Don't try to do everything all at once. It's too much. But pick something that will benefit from it, do it and do it right, and work with a partner who has experience doing that, and then grow from there. It's just one step at a time, but don't try to do everything all at once. This is something I have helped many customers with. I would happily help anybody else out there. And I think that you will see the benefit if you work with a successful partner.
Fascinating. Stephen, what an awesome session. And guys, thank you so much for all those great questions.